because everything's moving towards personalization with streaming. People are trying to personalize different camera shots. They're trying to personalize other stats. But if you can't personalize the sound, you're missing a massive element, which makes that game day experience feel realistic and lifelike for somebody who's watching it, whether in the venue or then at home. Well, welcome to another episode of Gigabytes. Today we're going to be focusing and talking about the automatic isolation of audio objects in real time to create personalized and embodied experiences.
Very interesting.
But I think we should probably start by explaining what embodied sound is to create these embodied experiences, as that's what we've been known as at Edge Sound Research and where our first invention and where everything started. So I want to quickly just define what embodied sound is.
Yeah, embodied sound is a way for somebody to be able to experience the fullness of sound through both hearing and feeling at the same level. As in the most amount your body can hear and the most amount your body can feel, that's what constitutes that experience. And it ends up being something very immersive and very detailed that you ordinarily wouldn't be able to get even from the highest end of speakers, because it's using both modalities that your body can handle.
Probably the best explanation you've given on that.
It's been 5 years, I hope so.
Yeah, that's great. But the reason why we started with embodied sound and how that applies to live entertainment market was we realized really quickly that by allowing somebody to hear and feel, we can connect them to a moment in time and really make them feel immersed and feel like they're a participant of it. Sports was the avenue that we started really scaling this out, creating experiences where you can sit in your seat, the seat becomes the source of sound, and while you're watching the game, you can hear and feel all the different elements from the players dribbling down the court, the shots, the swooshes, the sneaker squeaks, all those elements that obviously are intimate to the players and those that are sitting courtside, but as you get further away, it gets lost in translation, and that disconnects fans from the sport that they love. But as we started working on that, what did we learn very quickly?
Well, two things. One, if you can get a really good capture of that, then that experience is amazing. We learned that it was even potentially better than courtside, because even courtside only gets when they're close to that part of the court. If you're following them on the court and you have this amazing signal that you can then pipe directly to the seat, then you're basically getting this one-on-one action as if you're following the player, riding the court right next to them the whole time, which is an even better experience. And then you can deliver that to any seat in the house and even at home. It's like this amazing thing, if there's a good signal of those people on the players on the court. And that was like the first thing that as we were deploying this, because we started with music. And in music, the microphones are right on every instrument, or they're plugging in directly, and that signal goes directly to a mixer board, and that goes directly to our system. And there was never a problem with that, and that's kind of how we conceived of this, and that's where we started. And we moved into sports. The biggest learning curve was we have to now deal with microphones that can't be near the players, and then we can have to also worry about how many microphones are on the court, and they can't be visible, and there's all the sorts of restrictions that weren't in the case in the music side of it. And that does make it more difficult to get a clean capture of stuff that's happening on the court. And that obviously now decreases our signal to noise ratio. It means there's as much noise, which is PA and crowd, as there is a signal, which is the dribbling of the ball and the shoe squeaks and also some of the voices that we wanted to pick up. And so it made it really difficult to get those nuances over this like hostile attack of the PA and the crowd on the court.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, we were able to solve some of that on our end as we were getting the signal and clean up as much as possible and really pulling out those elements on the embodied sound side. But then we really quickly realized, why are we trying to solve it on the last part of the signal chain when we could actually look at it at the very beginning?
Yes.
And I know that you wanted something very, very, very specific from the game. What did you want from the game?
I wanted more ball. And I didn't think that 2 years ago that it was a big ask or a big request saying, hey, could you just give me a little more ball in the
What do you mean by more ball?
So when the dribble goes up and down the court, the ball is giving a pronounced tactile percussion. It's almost like a drum going up and down, pom pom pom, as you're dribbling. The NBA players are huge, and the distance between the hand to the ball, it makes a beautiful tactile bam every single time. But interestingly, with all the crowd and the PA, we were talking this morning that it's basically trying to find a needle in a haystack if the haystack is continuously assaulting the needle repeatedly the whole time. And so that's the situation we were dealt with. And by asking, could you see if you can give me more ball, knowing that there's body tracking, ball tracking that's happening in the arena already, I was like, surely you're tracking the ball. There must be some behind the scenes magic that you guys are doing to be able to, pull out some elements, since it comes out so crisp and clear during these games. And it seems to be there's some way to do this. And turns out there was not.
Yeah, so I think that leads to my surprise, which is that the way that a live event is captured today is 100% a manual process, which did blow my mind, where it's still the signals of all the microphones on the court, and there's a human operator that manually has to turn all the mics up and down based off the position of where it's at, guessing how much they want to turn everything up and down to get those gain levels. Obviously, they're very professional at it. They know how to create a very compelling experience. But as a human, how are you supposed to deal with that many objects, get it as clean as possible, considering the PA, the crowd noise, all these kinds of elements, to pull up the delicacy of a ball bounce or a conversation or a net swoosh, all in real time, was happening on the fly.
Yeah, well, and that's the interesting part of it, right? Like, if you have it, too clean, then there's definitely a part of it. It's like, this is unrealistic, and maybe it's not like what it would be if I was there. Their job is to try to simulate what it's like to be there, and with the energy of the crowd and everything. And I also feel like that's a little bit of a way of saying, let me just put a couple microphones in there, and then that is the experience of the venue. It's a little bit of a cop-out sometimes, but sometimes that's all you can do, and so you just do your best with what you can. But let's say you can have a larger budget, you can put as many microphones as you want to. You still can't put them near the players, unless what are you gonna do? Mic up every single player as they come in and out? You're gonna have 20 of these specific types of lapel microphones that it can withstand hits, and they have these shorter batteries that don't last the whole game. And if a player falls on them, you have to guarantee that they're not gonna get hurt, et cetera, et cetera. Like, they're expensive, each one of those packs, and even if you do get all those, you have to then track every player, and you know which one is going to which player, and you only have 10 fingers. So at that point, you can only really do kind of 10 mics at a time, or maybe less if you can't control them at the same time. And there's other things you have to deal with and deliver, and it's taking it what used to be an art form, which is creating and cultivating this experience of giving somebody else far away what the impression of being there, and it's turned it into this constant trying to cat and mouse game between the PA and the crowd, and when a player happens to get into a place that might get picked up by the microphone.
Yeah, that's a hard balance, and I think the other part that's really important to note here is that the amount of microphones you add is the amount that it goes to a board, and those are the channels, and somebody has to move. So the more microphones you're adding, right?
Yeah.
Human can only maximum do 10. With two, technically, right? Like,
to explain this, you can also think of it like from a music perspective, because that's where mixing boards were kind of made from, right? Every single microphone of like a venue, even right now, we have 2 microphones. This is going to a mixing board, and each mixing board has a channel, and each of those channels is for one microphone. If I want to turn off up and down your microphone, there's a gain knob on top. If I want to take away some of the bass or some of the high frequencies, all your channel has each of those little individual elements. There might be some other processing, like a compressor built into the board, but usually not. And then finally, there's a little fader that goes up and down. That is the final amount of your mic going into the entire mix, which is all the mics together into a single mix. The broadcast boards are basically big versions of that have a bunch of different inputs for a bunch of different microphones, and also the PA, the announcer, there are all sorts of other things that they have to consider as well.
So what you're really saying is like, and also the sum of all these microphones and everything that they're doing, and as they're mixing it together, they're taking many, but they're all summing it down to one, like one final stream.
Yeah, one final mix. Yeah, exactly.
Of information. So it's even there, it's really hard to like isolate and understand all the different objects, players, ball, sneaker squeaks, everything, because it's really just one massive file of audio that's really coming out of it. Right,
yeah. Which again is hard to deal with, especially when PA systems are getting louder, crowds are getting louder, and they're encouraged to be louder because it gets more part to that game. But but it also gets harder now that sound bars and smaller speaker systems that people are now putting in their homes, Sonos and HomePods, are now becoming better and better. You now have this better performance system at home that you're expecting a high resolution sound to go along with your high resolution image, which is shot up in quality over the last decade. But the sound system, trying to get that nuance and detail, just like how you can increase the resolution of your face, and then as the screens get bigger and bigger and you can see more and more detail, I can now see all the freckles of your face in the TV. You can't get that same amount of detail from these microphones that are all so far apart, just with that level of manual control into there. So
let's take this 1 year back. So we were at NBA Summer League 2023. Yeah, we're in 2024 now. Yeah. So 2023. And that was the first time we had the opportunity to really go kind of behind the scenes and learn about these. Like we learned about the limitations of why this kind of existing way of going about broadcast is today. But at Summer League, we had the first time to really kind of learn what can be done potentially to solve for this. So what did we identify a year ago to potentially solve for these limitations in the infrastructure level that we're kind of referring to here?
Or like, where were we a year ago?
Yeah.
I mean, and Summer League 2023 was the first time that we were able to kind of really dig as much as we wanted to behind the scenes and talk with each of the A1s, the mixing people that are mixing the audio. The A1 is like the lead audio engineer inside the truck. And we're asking him, like, what's your workflow? How are you doing this? How would you approach this? How would you give me more ball if we were to ask for it? And there's this kind of a bunch of different ways that they might have gone to embellish or enhance it a little bit, enhance, and suddenly they turned up a little bit. But there was not really a way to distinguish the ball from all the other sounds on the court. And for something as so intimate as embodied sound, which is right next to you, we really, at that point, because we were deploying an embodied sound system, we were looking for a very discrete channel of ball that we could control, and we could, even if it wasn't perfect, we could then clean it up on our side with what we had been doing that whole year, right? And it just got to the point where it was very clear to us that there was no way, because there was no system, because the infrastructure was not built for something like that. And it became clear to us that this is a much bigger question of not can you give me more ball, but it's really what is the infrastructure required to be able to provide the audio engineers that ability to be able to separate things on the court or things on the field into their own discrete channels, so that way people like us and people that might come after us might have the ability to be able to have those discrete audio channels of every player. Maybe down the line people need to make a highlight package of a single player, and you have all the player audio together. And what if we want to do a highlight package of where the ball is going, etc. There's all sorts of things you can do with it, but the infrastructure is not available for that thing. So that one small question ended up being a much bigger task.
And I think that's obviously so timely, because everything's moving towards personalization with streaming. People are trying to personalize different camera shots. They're trying to personalize other stats. But if you can't personalize the sound, you're missing a massive element, which makes that game day experience feel realistic and lifelike for somebody who's watching it, whether in the venue or then at home or anywhere for that matter, from that data. But yeah, actually you kind of brought up, there's a massive limitation. There's a human limitation, there's a mic infrastructure limitation, and then there's the technology in between that kind of talks to those two things. Is just not there. So from there, we had the opportunity to really learn, and we kind of came to another aha moment. And I feel like we get a lot of aha moments, but the aha moments are all to create this personalized, embodied experiences that people can have. And that led to the realization that we call the real-time virtual sound engine, which is a combination of multiple technologies. But can you define what came into real-time virtual sound engine? Like, what is that? Like, what was this learning process into?
So once we kind of realized there's a limitation, like you said, infrastructure, and also just from human ability, we realized that there might be a way to automate some of this process. Again, not to eliminate the A1 from there, but it's like that person needs to get back into the artistic role where they're designing the environment and not trying to run around like a chicken with their head cut off trying to manage a bunch of microphones, because things are so loud that if you leave them open, it bleeds into the other part of it. So we were trying to figure out, if there's such a way to track every single object, and we know the object that we want to track, which in this case is the ball, is there a way we can use that ball data to tell a system managing the microphones how to turn on and off those microphones at a strategic time in order to give us that ball outcome, and that began this kind of journey into realizing if we coordinate the microphones, not just turning them on and off, if we blend the microphones, we get this kind of perspective. If we blend them all together and we do it multiple times for all the people, and then it started really snowballing. But in essence, the first thing was just focusing on the ball, and essentially the way we do this was to use more microphones than a human could possibly imagine, but it also means it gives us a sensitivity that we wouldn't be able to get before, and that effectively covers or washes the whole court in this like sound. There's already sound going on all over the court. Some of it's big sound coming from the crowd, big sound coming from the PA, but there's little sounds coming from the court, the dribbling of the ball, the shoe squeaks, and then also the players talking. All of those are all little sounds, big sounds, little sounds. Think of it like a small ocean that's on the court, and there's big fish, small fish. There's a lot of water on there. And effectively, we want to grab one little piece inside that volume of water and just harden that one piece so we can follow it from looking outside the water as it comes up and down the court. And that's basically what our virtual sound engine does, is it takes that water and it freezes a little section of it, and we can follow that ice cube as it comes up and down the court. So that way we can use that as our source that we're using for embodied sound and other things.
Yeah, and also to be very clear, those ice cubes are going to be the players, the ball, like the things we really care about on the court. So obviously basketball game, 5-5 ball, there's 11 ice cubes that are on there.
Exactly.
We can isolate and track every ice cube independently, pull that audio data, have them as their own channels so that people can play with them and have it. So it's now like virtually miking up all those 11 objects that are directly on the court itself. But the other beauty of it is it doesn't just have to be those. If there was something that happened on the court that was not getting tracked, but we're like, it happened in that corner, we can now just pick up the audio from that corner and create like almost like a virtual microphone there. So it sounds crystal clear.
That's right.
From that position.
Yeah, after the fact, we can basically point a shotgun at a microphone, which is a long-range microphone, in any direction at any point of the court, because we have that wash of sound that's always there. It's raw data, and it's like a giant pool of data, and we just pull out the part that we want to and concretize any one piece of it at any given moment, live or afterwards.
So let's take this back to the original where we started this whole thing. Like what we're focused on as sound researchers really just automatically isolating those audio objects in real time, and I think that's the other key part is getting it to real time.
Yeah.
I just want to emphasize why that matters, why isolating audio objects has any particular like value.
Yeah, true.
So I think the question really comes down to what happens after the fact of it's being captured. So on broadcasting, like we talked about before, personalization is massive. So if you're going to want to change camera perspectives, change the shot, whether you want to just capture certain players that are on the court, away versus home, or around the ball, that now it becomes an automated choice. It doesn't need to be that is somebody who manually has to mix for all those different things, because today, if you want to create those experiences, you need a dedicated audio engineer for every single new perspective that you're doing.
Each new mix,
so you
right.
can't scale that out. It's almost impossible to scale
Right.
that out, because the more you're doing, it's more microphones, more people, more cost, and it doesn't become very viable to actually create this world of personalization. But if we're using a computer, you have an endless way to use this data, whether it be for that broadcast or then after the fact for like a social media post where there's a great highlight and you just want to track that object and get a really crisp sound and have an audio file ready to go that you just post with the video.
Yeah, there's like a big split in the way we could have done this, and I think we chose a way that was going to be more flexible. There's either you can make the existing infrastructure better by trying to say, hey, open only the mics when the stuff is near, and that does improve quality for the existing mix. But in our way, we can make an unlimited amount of mixes now that we have the level of isolation of each audio object, because we're logically looking at them different, even though the ball stem might sound the same if we just open up the mics over here or if we do it our way. But over time, ours can get better. Over time, if we add more microphones, that gets even tighter. Over time, that means this is automated the whole way. Over time, that means that this now becomes a ball from looking this direction, ball looking from this direction, or whatever. You can have 6 degrees of freedom now in an unlimited amount of mixes that broadcast can have, that game day audio can have, that live can be pumped into the bathrooms, that can go out to their, video game thing later. And they're also all audio objects. So if you did ever want to relive that thing in some sort of video game world in the future, then they're already ready to go and already mixed with their metadata that doesn't exist if we just wanted to make the existing thing a little better.
I think that's the other part, is that we're actually in the world of sound, right? Like every object in the world resonates and chaotically creates vibrations and sound out of that vibration, right? If we're capturing, isolating all of those objects, we actually are creating the sound profiles of what's happening in those moments in time, not the final snapshot byproduct, which is right now a capture coming from a microphone. Is that correct? Or I mean,
yeah, no,
correct me if I'm wrong. There's probably another way to say that, but
no. You have a good point too. If we look at it as saying, are we putting better microphones out in the field? That's not what we're doing. I think that's a byproduct of how we're doing it today, because that's the best way to capture vibrations from the court. Those vibrations are essentially sound vibrations that we want to reproduce. But let's say it's not just sound vibration that we're capturing today. Let's say it's just physical vibration, or it's some other sensory data that comes out in the future now that there's a way to be able to take that sensory information later. Yeah, we're more effectively cloning what's happening on the court, and that we can reproduce any part of it in any way that needs to happen. Maybe it's just for sound for now, and totally fine. fine. We can just take the audio sensor data and reproduce that sensor data because it'll be maintained. But let's say there's a lot of physical data out there, and we want to feel what's happening when they're running across the court. How much force are they striking at any given moment or whatever? That's something that can be preserved with this method of cloning what's happening on the court, and that's something cool that we can do with at a later date, even if people don't have an application for it now. Same thing with, I don't know, moisture data and how much are they sweating over a certain period of time. The opportunities are endless when we stop looking at it from just, are we picking up sound and reproducing sound, but are we picking up data from this data pool? And we keep adding layers and layers and layers of data to this pool, and we are able to take each player's location, and they have each player is like a slice of this cake, which all these layers of audio data, of humidity data, of sensor data, heart rate data, whatever can be in this cake, and then you can separate them out all over the place. Or a layered ice cube, I think, Tor.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's we like our ice cubes. But I do think that the part that's so interesting is that we're really now turning the real world into a video game engine, because I think the limitations of playing in the real world is what has halted back a lot of these technologies. Because once you think about it, in a video game environment, you can manipulate all the physics. You can't change the physics of the real world, but you can adjust freely things in a video game engine.
That's right.
So if we're able to capture the data and then reprocess it and play around with that, it's awesome what we can potentially do in the world of obviously VR, AR, and all that. That's exciting. Future use case, not there yet. Yeah. But everything we're doing today applies so well to me watching the game off my phone. If I could even stereo have a really compelling experience and feel like I'm next to the court.
Even in mono today, if you just have one speaker trying to reproduce it, you want to make sure that the object that you're interested in is the greatest in that stream.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it just makes it very compelling and clean. So obviously, was a year. We had opportunities to learn and get feedback from the industry, learn with 8.1s, keep building on it. We recently had the opportunity to live deploy this technology and see firsthand, like, okay, can this do what we think it's going to do? So what was the impact on that?
So yeah, first of all, we had conceived this at the last year, and then 1 year later, we're back and trying to, okay, we've conceived it, we've tested it, we've done the beta, the initial proof of concepts, and each one proved that it kind of is working the way we think it's going to work. And then running it in real time was the game changer that I think that we on the research team were kind of all like, there's no way that it already works at this level. Is it perfect? No. But it worked so much at the level that was above what we were expecting, to the degree of, I think we're confident now that this will turn into what Unreal Engine turned into, which is like, let's say, you remember how video game graphics were like, okay, when they first came out, and like maybe 20 years later, now we're going to video game graphics as the final graphics. And because of the nature of the flexibility, that's now the preferred workflow than it is having those rendered worlds, because now you have to go back and re-render those worlds and redo all that stuff, versus a video game engine, you can change it on the fly. And I think that's going to happen here too, where we started, it may not be perfect right now, pretty damn good, but not perfect. And very quickly, if we just mirror a lot of that trajectory from the video game world, it's going to get to the point where this flexibility is going to outperform even the highest end microphone system, just because of the flexibility, because of the way that we're approaching it, because of the multimodal approach of this. The magnitude change of having the architecture difference is what gives it the magnitude change, and not just iterating on a small improvement. Yeah.
So I mean, obviously the live deployment, we were able to see, holy crap, we can isolate the objects, we can track the ball,
and hands off.
Hands off. You're not doing anything.
It's happening. Turn up ball, and we have a ball stem. Finally.
We got exactly the thing that we wanted a year ago, and now that exists. But I think the other part that's really exciting about this kind of core technology is that it's in its infancy. Like literally the worst possible experience you could have today
was pretty damn good.
Was there where we're like, whoa, like it can already hit. So as we deploy this more, as it exists more, the more it's going through the process of capturing data, learning about the data, learning about the workflows, we learn about that process too. We'll then relate back into a better system that is more scalable, that is more usable. And then from that pool of water, we can then create a bunch of tools where people can actually take what they need at the point that they need it.
Yeah, and they can do it automatically. They can do it based on other triggers. There's all sorts of ways to do it, as long as the data pool is there. And as long as we're capturing this data pool at the beginning, which is a point to consider of putting more emphasis in the capture portion of it. As long as that data pool exists, we can keep pulling from it forever in different ways. ways that we can't even conceive today, things that we're not even thinking of for our 10-year plan. Maybe people 20 years down the line are like, hey, wait a minute, if you have all that data from these perspectives, then you could be able to pull something out of it that we can't even articulate today. And I think that's one of the coolest things about it. But like you said, even today, it's not bad, and that's the worst it'll ever be. And the cool part is there's also ways to improve it that aren't hardware. A lot of it can be improved in software, but any bit of improvement on the outside also helps dramatically improve its performance.
I mean, better hardware systems make better software systems. They work in tandem together. I know we're in a world that everything needs to be software, but at the same time, you can't build new infrastructure without some hardware, because that's what always drives the industries forward. But I do think that the other part that is really interesting here is, like, now we have successfully turned objects in the real world, like seats and all that, into sources of sound with embodied sound. Then looked on the other side of it, we've now successfully figured out a way to use existing microphones and object tracking to then isolate objects in the real world.
To create virtual sound objects,
So obviously our ultimate goal is how do we automate it from this point to this point to make it where no matter where you're at the world, it feels one and the same, and I'm in that sound event. But
now I can use the river analogy.
Go for it.
Okay, so you know how salmon try to like swim upstream and it's real difficult for them to get up there? Yeah, so that's where reproduction is. Reproduction is at the very end of the audio stream, right? You generate it from one side, so water melts from the mountains and it goes down the river and everybody drinks from the river and then it dumps out to sea, right? So let's say speakers are like the jetting out to sea, right? It's just you get what you get at that point of it. There's nothing you can change about it. It's whatever you put in is what comes out. That's the end of the sea. At the beginning is the microphone, and that's what you're capturing from there, and that's what's generating the stream. In between there, a lot of stuff happens, right? You can get boulders fall in there, trees fall in there.
A lot of things happen. I thought it just magically went from boom and out.
That's quantum teleportation. We'll get to that next one. No, but imagine us as salmon at that end point of it, and we're trying to swim upstream. We're trying to ask people, hey, can you remove that from there? Can you get that rock out of here? Can you take that boulder out? And just no one, you so much coordination between 10 different teams are all using that stream, either dumping into it or taking stuff out of it, and some of that taking in or putting out is a contact, and some of those contacts is where stuff gets messed up. Potentially, right? It always has a potential for getting messed up in all these different places down the stream. And so, we're swimming upstream and we're getting blocked by one way or another, so we can never make it all the way upstream. But if we kind of know what's going on up here, and we can generate something at the very beginning of it that gives everybody their own little stream, instead of everybody sharing the river, then nobody has to interfere with what everybody else is getting. So you can have your perfect stream, I can have my perfect stream, I can have mine, and then they can have theirs. And I feel like that's going to be the best thing for the infrastructure that everybody can build on top of that, because now you have these new dedicated, whatever I need, I get streams of information coming from the same source. And it's like everybody gets their own bottle of water in perfect eco-friendly ways.
But more importantly, through that stream, you have your ice cubes, which are your audio objects.
That's right.
That now you can move through the stream. So then at the point, and clone and manipulate and re-render, but now it actually unlocks dynamic spatial audio, which has not existed before in live broadcasting.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a pretty big thing, because obviously today you can make a spatial mix, obviously, of a live sport. It exists today, but they're static views. They're always off one viewpoint, how the objects are moving in that one viewpoint. Awesome. But if we want to get to a world where sound is moving freely like it is in the real world, all around us, we got to isolate those ice cubes here.
From the beginning.
And then have them move down the stream, right? And from the first part of capturing, but then you got to process it and make it as clean as possible and do what you want to do and manipulate it, right? But then you got to render it.
That's right.
Can you explain what rendering is? Because I think that's the other part, is like people have heard of Dolby, people have heard of these spatial companies.
Renderers and stuff.
Renderers and all that, but I don't think most people understand what the renderer is doing.
In like an easy sense, it's like to make, right? Render is like to render a form is like to make it into a form, and put it into a medium. To make real is kind of rendering, right? So you can have a bunch of stuff that's imaginary, and then when you render it to a piece of paper, you're like writing it down, making it real. So in essence, that's what a renderer does. But a renderer can only make real the sources it has. That finds itself at the very bottom of that river analogy, right? It gets what it gets, and then it renders the best it can. If you can preserve that ice cube from the beginning all the way through to the end, you now have given this renderer all of the data it could possibly need to render the most realistic scenario possible. And that would just be a dream come true for any rendering company who wants to render it in a specific way. You want to render it for a sweet spot? go for it, Dolby. You got all the audio object information you need, and you can get it live, baby. Go for it. People that want to render in a hyper immersive 10-room type of scenario that doesn't work for Dolby Atmos but works for a different type of renderer, great. They have all the information they need to be able to reproduce the court in whatever room that they're going to be in, wherever they are in the world. Having the information preserved along that pathway is so valuable as an infrastructural method there.
And the last point I want to make on your lovely river analogy here is with channel-based audio, and like we kind of talked about, if there doesn't have those separation of objects in the beginning, it's very hard to have that process be automated through, because at that processing stage, people are trying to create those objects, and at the rendering stage, they're trying to manipulate with those objects,
right.
But they don't exist from the get-go. So
right.
even in this world of AI ML, that process is always still going to have these manual steps because it's based off channels.
Right.
But if we have those objects from the get-go, and we piggyback off of these channel ecosystems that exist today that have been built over the last 100 years, right? We can then eventually skip the whole road and just get you from the point of, hey, we have an object here. Hey, we want to put it in this environment.
Yes.
Everything in between just happens.
Right, because we have maintained the metadata of position and intensity and depth and location relative to the other ones. Yes, we have all the information we need to be able to hand off to a one-size-fits-all rendering system, like a Apple Vision Pro, like a VR space, like anything that deals with spatial objects.
Yeah, and I mean, what that's really going to do is it, once again, like we talked about, the world of audio engineers now can be creative. Yeah. Like they don't need to worry about all the hard processes they have to do right now, because man, I feel bad for you guys seeing what you guys have to do to clean up stuff.
Thanks, man.
It could just happen. You can tell the systems what you want to get out of whatever you're trying to do, and build the most compelling experiences without necessarily the most technical know-how. And I think that's going to completely democratize content creation too, leveraging audio and the creation of experiences we don't even know are even possible because of how complex audio workflows are today.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if instead of the microphones we have in front of us, we actually have microphones around us that can then just pinpoint you and me, and then I can be able to move as freely as I need to be as expressive as I need to, and it would track me the whole time, and it would never have to worry about it, as if I had like a perfect lapel that also doesn't get messed up if I touch my shirt or something like that. Yeah, there's tons of things that can be done with the flexibility. Yep. Again, not trying to improve that existing one, but just trying to reimagine this flexible thing that can happen for not only this, but also different types of stuff in the future.
That's wild. Yeah. That's wild. But yeah, obviously, I mean, for our ends right now, it's already awesome that we have that first part and that last part. Over time, we're obviously going to close that gap and make sure that we have this entire stream of information that's going through. But
we're the stewards of audio, you know?
Yeah, I mean,
we will preserve it from the beginning to the end, is our promise.
There we go. There we go. But yeah, no, it's been exciting. I mean, who would have thought from day one as we were building this company that we have this kind of epiphany around the whole infrastructure as a whole? Because obviously we started on how do we make the most compelling experiences on the reproduction side, but exactly as you brought up, there's not that much choice there, because once that audio is at that point, the audio is already at that point. But having this choice, and I can't wait until we start really messing with people and start, you know, making you be in a living room and you're like, am I actually in a living room? I don't know.
Yeah. We just have to take over your other senses at some point too, man.
You got to start with one. Let's stick to audio and the multimodal nature there. But yeah, no, I think this was a great conversation about obviously how we've evolved, how we've learned about the audio industry, and how we are actively working with leaders in the industry to build this with them. Because obviously this is not just going to happen overnight by ourselves. We're going to need buy-in. We're going to need to work with a lot of those that have built the existing infrastructure, and then how do we piggyback off of that? So super excited with working with our partners and continue to keep building this.
Yeah, and let us know how we can make your lives easier. That's kind of what we're here for. We're in the building stage of this. This would be the time to get in, to let us know how we can make those workflows as simple as possible.
Yep. Yeah. Awesome. Well, great conversation, and it's another episode of Gigabytes.
Thanks, Doc. All right, back to work.
Yep.